In 1952, an archaeologist found a hidden staircase descending deep into the heart of a Maya pyramid. At the bottom, sealed for over 1,200 years, was a 5-ton stone sarcophagus, carved with an image so strange that it sparked one of the biggest controversies in 20th century history. Half the world looked at that carving and saw a man piloting a spaceship. Scientists looked at it and saw something even more astonishing. What is actually on that lid, and what it tells us about the civilization that created it, is a story more remarkable than any alien theory ever invented. The jungle of southern Mexico keeps its secrets well. The ruins of Palenque sit in the foothills of the Chiapas highlands, wrapped in mist and the sounds of howler monkeys. And for centuries, the stone temples that rose above the tree line were assumed to be exactly what they appeared to be from the outside. Ceremonial platforms, religious monuments, empty shells of a civilization that had collapsed and vanished. Nobody looked underneath them. It did not occur to anyone that a pyramid might be something other than solid stone and rubble all the way down. Alberto Ruz Lullier arrived at Palenque in 1948 to lead systematic excavation. In the summer of that year, working inside the Temple of the Inscriptions, the largest pyramid at the site, he noticed something that had been there all along. The floor of the inner chamber had a large stone slab with 2 rows of small drilled holes, plugged with stone stoppers. At the slab's edge were finger holds, indentations that would allow a person to grip and pull. This was not decorative. This was a handle. Someone had designed this stone so that it could be lifted. When Ruz's team removed the slab, they found not a floor beneath it, but a staircase. A descending corridor choked with rubble and debris that had been packed deliberately, intentionally sealed. Whatever was down there, whoever had built this, they had not wanted it found easily. The staircase went down into darkness at a steep angle, and the pyramid's stone mass surrounded it on all sides, like a mountain of rock pressing in from above. Working in that space was difficult. The air was thin and hot. Progress was measured in centimeters per day. It would take Ruz and his team 4 full excavation seasons, spread across 4 years, to clear that staircase from top to bottom. 45 steps down, then a landing, then more steps, then at the level of the jungle floor outside, 20 meters below where they had started, a wall. And in front of that wall, a stone box filled with offerings. And on the floor before the final sealed door, the skeletal remains of 6 individuals who had been placed there and sealed inside. They had not died there by accident. They had been put there deliberately, as guardians, as sacrifice, as the last line between the living world and whatever lay beyond that door. The Maya called the world beyond that door Xibalba, the place of fear, the underworld, the kingdom of death and transformation. Ruz was about to walk into Xibalba. The door at the base of the staircase was triangular, a massive slab of stone fitted precisely into a triangular opening in the wall. Triangular doors appear repeatedly in Maya funerary architecture and are believed to be specific to the underworld threshold, the boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. This particular door had not been opened since sometime in the 7th century. Whatever atmosphere existed beyond it had been sealed inside for more than 1,200 years. The 6 skeletal individuals found in front of the door were examined. Their age at death, the condition of their bones, and the manner of their arrangement all pointed in one direction. They were young. They had been placed there at the time of the final sealing, which meant they had not wandered in and died. They had been killed and positioned as part of the funerary ceremony. In Maya cosmology, death was not only the end of life, but the beginning of a journey, and important people did not make that journey alone. Servants, attendants, and companions were sometimes sacrificed to accompany the deceased into the underworld, to serve them there as they had served them in life. Whatever person lay beyond this door had been important enough to warrant this. The offering box in front of the door contained jade beads, cinnabar powder stained red, shells, and fragments of ceramic. Each item carried specific symbolic weight. Jade meant life force and breath. The Maya associated it with the color of young maize, the most sacred plant in their world. Cinnabar, the red mercury sulfide mineral, represented blood and regeneration. Shells were associated with water, with the ocean, with the boundary between worlds. These were not random objects. They were a precisely composed message left in a language of symbols, and the message was this: something of extraordinary importance has been sealed here, and it has been given everything it needs for the journey. Roos's team used metal tools and careful hands to move the triangular door. The stone pivoted on a peg at its base, an ingenious engineering solution that meant the massive door could be opened without sliding or being fully lifted, simply rotated on its axis. When the door swung open for the first time in 12 centuries, the air that came out was cold and moist and tasted of deep stone and time. The team brought their lights inside. The walls of the burial chamber were decorated with 9 life-sized stucco reliefs, the Bolontiku, the 9 lords of the night, underworld deities who governed the dead. They lined the walls like an honor guard around what was, until that moment, one of the most perfectly preserved royal burials in the Western Hemisphere. The burial chamber was 9 meters long and 4 meters wide. The ceiling vaulted upward in the characteristic Maya corbelled arch, overlapping stones projecting inward to a pointed roof. From that ceiling, stalactites had formed over the centuries, slow mineral deposits from water seeping through rock above, dripping for 1,200 years into the chamber that held the coffin below. The sarcophagus, the stone coffin, was enormous. The lid alone was 3.8 meters long and 2.2 meters wide, and it weighed approximately 5 tons. It rested on a monolithic base that itself weighed several more tons. The combined mass of the coffin and its contents constituted one of the largest single-object burials ever discovered in the Americas. And here is where the first genuine engineering mystery begins. The staircase down which Roos had spent 4 years digging was narrow. A human being could move through it easily enough, but a 5-ton stone slab could not. The corridor was too tight, the turns too sharp, the angle too steep. There was no physical way to have carried that lid down that staircase after the pyramid was built. The conclusion that archaeologists reached, and it is a conclusion supported by the physical evidence, is that the sequence of construction was the reverse of what intuition suggests. The sarcophagus was not placed inside the pyramid. The pyramid was built around the sarcophagus. The coffin was laid first, in a prepared chamber at ground level, and the entire pyramid was then constructed above and around it over the following years or decades. The staircase was added not as a means of delivering the burial, but as a means of connection, a passage from the world above to the world below, sealed and rubble-filled after the final interment. Running alongside the staircase, from the burial chamber all the way to the temple floor above, was a thin stone tube, a hollow channel, roughly a finger's diameter, that followed every twist of the staircase through the sealed rubble. Archaeologists call it a psychoduct, a spirit tube, a channel through which the soul of the deceased could remain connected to the ceremonies performed above. It was not a ventilation shaft. It was too small and too precisely rooted. The Maya did not think of the dead as gone. They thought of them as transformed and still present, accessible, consultable, part of the ongoing life of the community. The psychoduct was the telephone line to the underworld. This level of planning, building the entire pyramid to serve as a monument around a single burial, incorporating a soul channel running the full height of the structure, implies the involvement of a person with extraordinary power. Who could command that? When Alberto Ruz published photographs of the sarcophagus lid in the early 1950s, the images circulated through academic and popular press. The carving on that lid was extraordinarily complex, dense with figures and symbols arranged in a composition that filled the entire surface. It was beautiful and strange, and unlike anything most people in Europe or North America had seen before. In 1968, Erich von Daniken published Chariots of the Gods and reproduced the Palenque lid alongside a remarkable claim. Turn the image sideways, he argued, and the central figure appears to be seated in a reclined chair, hands on controls, feet on pedals, fire emerging from a nozzle below, a rocket nose cone rising above. The figure, he claimed, was a man piloting a spacecraft. The book sold tens of millions of copies. It appeared at the precise moment, the Apollo era, when humanity was putting people on rockets and sending them to the moon, and the idea of ancient visitors from the stars felt somehow plausible. The Palenque lid became one of the most famous images in the ancient astronaut theory, reproduced on posters and television programs for decades. The problem is that the analysis was entirely wrong, and it was wrong in a way that reveals more about the observer than about the carving. Von Daniken looked at a Maya artwork and applied 20th century Western frameworks to it. He saw what he expected to see rather than what was actually there. He also rotated the image from its correct orientation. The lid is meant to be read vertically, as it sits, not horizontally as he displayed it. When you look at it in its correct orientation, with any familiarity with Maya iconography, none of the elements he identified are present. There is no spacecraft. There is no astronaut. There is something far more interesting. The real interpretation was developed by epigraphers, specialists in Maya writing and visual language, who worked through decades of scholarship to decode the glyphic texts surrounding the carving and the iconographic conventions embedded in every element of the composition. Their answer requires understanding the Maya cosmological system, which is internally consistent, extraordinarily sophisticated, and completely different from anything the modern Western mind defaults to. The carving is not a technical diagram. It is a theological statement of staggering complexity and beauty. The central figure on the Palenque lid is a man dying and descending. He falls backward in the posture Maya art consistently uses for downward passage into the underworld. He falls into the open mouth of the earth monster, the deity that represents the earth itself, whose mouth is the entrance to the underworld, which sits at the bottom of the composition with its great jaws open. The element that von Daniken identified as a rocket nozzle with exhaust flames is the head of the serpent of the underworld, a creature whose body curves through the lower portion of the composition. What he saw as control panels and instrument clusters are in fact the face and claws and body segments of various underworld creatures arranged around the falling king. The pedals are the feet of skeletal deities. The cockpit is a framework of serpent bodies and skeletal imagery that represents the boundary between the world of the living and the realm below. Rising above the central figure, what von Daniken called the nose cone of a rocket, is the Waka Chan, the world tree. In Maya cosmology, the world tree stands at the center of the universe and connects all three levels of existence: the underworld below, the middle world of everyday life, and the heavens above. It is depicted as a cross-shaped structure with roots in the earth, a trunk in the middle world, and branches extending upward into the sky. At its apex sits a celestial bird, Itzamnaj, the supreme creator deity of the Maya, perched atop the tree and watching over the transition about to take place. What the lid shows in total is this: the moment of King Pakal's death, depicted as a cosmic event. He falls into the underworld as the world tree rises above him, connecting the realms. The supreme deity waits above. The lords of death and transformation surround him below. His soul is not being extinguished, it is being received into a system, absorbed into the machinery of the cosmos, transformed from a living king into an ancestor with the power to mediate between worlds. This is not a technological diagram. It is one of the most sophisticated religious images produced by any civilization in human history. The glyphs surrounding the central scene include his name, his lineage, his accession date, his death date, and a statement connecting his death to the movement of the planet Venus, the morning star, the symbol of resurrection and return. Everything on that lid was intentional. Every element was a word in a language that scholars spent decades learning to read. And what it says is extraordinary enough that it required no aliens to make it so. When the sarcophagus lid was finally raised, using car jacks and timber levers, what lay beneath it was a sight Ruz described as unlike anything in decades of fieldwork. The interior was coated in deep, brilliant red. Everything, bones, objects, stone walls, was red. The color was cinnabar, mercury sulfide, which the Maya used in elite burials to symbolize blood and the cycle of death and regeneration. The red dust had settled over everything for 12 centuries, preserving the contents while transforming the space into a single symbolic statement: the color of blood, the color of the rising sun, the color of life returning from death. Lying within the red interior was a human skeleton, and on the skeleton's face was one of the most remarkable objects ever recovered from the ancient Americas. The jade death mask of Pakal was assembled from approximately 200 individual pieces of jade, each cut and polished and fitted together into a mosaic that perfectly reproduced a human face, the face, presumably, of the king himself. The eyes were inlaid with shell and obsidian, white and black, giving the mask an unsettling impression of open, staring eyes. The nose was straight, the lips slightly parted, the cheeks high and carved with the precision of a craftsman who knew this face well. For the Maya, jade occupied the position that gold held for European civilizations, and went further. Jade was the material substance of life force itself. The Maya word for jade was related to the word for breath. It was the color of young maize shoots, the color of the world renewing itself. Placing a jade mask on a dead king was not decoration. It was a statement that he was not merely dead, but transformed, his face now made of the substance of life itself. Around the skeleton were further jade objects: rings on the fingers, bracelets, a jade bead placed in each hand, necklaces of hundreds of jade pieces arranged in precise order. A jade bead had been placed in the mouth, the breath bead, the life bead, ensuring that whatever animated the king would remain with him. On his wrists and ankles were beads of obsidian and pyrite. The total quantity of jade in the burial was extraordinary, more than any other Maya burial yet discovered. The objects were catalogued, photographed, and eventually moved to the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, where the jade mask became one of the most iconic artifacts in the museum's collection. The sarcophagus remained in the tomb. The pyramid remained standing. And the question of who exactly was buried there, which seemed straightforwardly answered by the glyphic texts, was about to get unexpectedly complicated. The inscriptions on the walls of the Temple of the Inscriptions, on the sarcophagus itself, and on the lid are among the most extensive texts surviving from the classic Maya period. They were not fully decoded at the time of Ruz's discovery. The systematic breakthrough in reading Maya glyphs did not come until later decades of scholarly work. But as that decoding progressed, the texts revealed a precise and detailed account of the life of the person buried in the tomb. His name, rendered in glyphs, was King Pakal. Kinich means sun-faced, a title connecting the ruler to the sun deity. He was born in 603 CE. He acceded to the throne of Palenque at the age of 12 in 615 CE, under circumstances that were politically fraught. He died, according to the inscriptions, in 683 CE, at the age of 80. His reign of 68 years was one of the longest in recorded Maya history, longer, in fact, than Queen Victoria's reign over the British Empire. The problem was the bones. When physical anthropologists examined the skeletal remains in the 1950s, they estimated the age at death of the individual based on the standard forensic indicators: the condition of the joints, the fusion of bone growth plates, the degree of dental wear. And their estimate was not 80. Their estimate was 40 to 45 years old. This was not a minor discrepancy. If the inscriptions were correct, the man died at 80. If the forensic examination was correct, the man died around 45. These two figures could not both be right. Either the inscriptions were fabricated, the Maya had invented a longer reign than actually occurred, or the bones were not Pakal's, or the forensic analysis was wrong. The discrepancy fueled decades of debate and attracted two competing camps. One group argued that the inscriptions were politically motivated, that Maya rulers routinely extended their claimed reigns to enhance their legitimacy and divine status, and that this burial might not even be Pakal at all, but someone else, interred in a monument built for propaganda purposes. The other group argued that the forensic analysis was being applied without adequate cultural context. A new analysis in the 1990s used histological examination, cutting thin cross-sections of bone and examining the microscopic tissue structure under magnification. The histological results supported an age at death much closer to 80 years. The explanation for the earlier estimate was cultural. Pakal ate differently than the commoners whose bones formed the forensic baseline. His diet was rich in soft foods, cacao drinks, well-cooked meals, causing minimal dental wear. His teeth looked younger than his years because privilege had protected them his entire life. The bones belonged to an old man who had eaten like a king. The inscriptions told the truth. King Pakal inherited a city in crisis. In the decades before his birth, Palenque had suffered a series of devastating military defeats at the hands of its rival Calakmul, one of the most powerful Maya cities of the classic period, which, at its height, controlled a network of allied and subordinate cities across a vast portion of the Maya lowlands. In 599 CE, just 4 years before Pakal's birth, Calakmul's forces attacked Palenque and inflicted a defeat severe enough to leave lasting marks in the archaeological and inscriptional record. The political situation in 615 CE, when the 12-year-old Pakal came to the throne, was one of genuine instability. He would rule for 68 years. What he accomplished in that time transformed Palenque from a weakened, threatened secondary city into one of the most architecturally sophisticated and politically significant centers in the Maya world. Part of what made Pakal's rise possible was his mother, Lady Sak-Kuuk. She served as co-regent during his early years on the throne, a woman holding executive power in a political system that was formerly patrilineal, which was itself a remarkable circumstance. The inscriptions record her role carefully, and the sculptural programs commissioned during the early part of Pakal's reign show her depicted in powerful, divine terms. She appears to have been genuinely formidable, and her political management of the transition allowed Pakal the time and stability to grow into his role before he was required to exercise it alone. Pakal's building program transformed Palenque physically as well as politically. The architectural style that characterizes the city, mansard roofs, delicate stucco reliefs, graceful corbelled vaults, reached its fullest expression under his direction. The inscriptions he sponsored were not merely decorative. They were historical documents, political arguments, and theological statements in a script of remarkable density. The connection between Pakal and the sun deity Kinich Ahau, embedded in his name, was not accidental. He used the artistic and inscriptional resources of his court to construct a theological identity that linked his personal existence to the movement of celestial bodies. His birth, his accession, his military campaigns, and his death were all framed in terms of astronomical events, solstices, planetary alignments, the movements of Venus. This was not mere metaphor. In Maya thinking, the king was a cosmic actor, and his life events were woven into the fabric of the universe's ongoing operation. The pyramid that would become his tomb was the physical expression of that claim. For decades after Roos's 1952 discovery, the assumption was that the tomb had revealed what it had to reveal. The artifacts were catalogued, the inscriptions were studied, the sarcophagus stayed in place, too large and too fragile to move. The interior staircase was eventually closed to tourists because moisture and carbon dioxide from thousands of visitors was visibly damaging the stucco surfaces. What remained was protecting what had been found and continuing to decode the surrounding texts. Then, in 2016, archaeologists working with ground-penetrating radar, a technology that sends radio waves through solid material and maps reflections from subsurface features, detected something unexpected directly beneath the Temple of the Inscriptions. Running under the pyramid, passing directly beneath the burial chamber, was a tunnel. Not the staircase. A different passage, previously unknown, following the course of a natural water channel that the Maya had modified and incorporated into their construction. The Maya were hydraulic engineers of considerable sophistication. At Palenque specifically, the city's water management system was already recognized as remarkable. The site is crossed by several streams, and the Maya had channeled and controlled these using aqueducts that in some cases were designed to build hydraulic pressure and create upward-flowing water features. But the channel discovered beneath Pakal's tomb added a dimension that went beyond practical engineering. The channel appears to have been symbolic rather than functional. In Maya cosmology, the underworld, Xibalba, was a watery realm,
The place of the dead was also a place of rivers, subterranean water, the ocean beneath the earth. By directing a real underground channel beneath the royal tomb, the architects were not managing drainage, they were constructing a physical underworld, making cosmology literally true beneath their feet. The dead king would lie above a real river, connected to the world above by a real spirit tube, surrounded by the real lords of the night, beneath a lid showing the precise theological moment of his transformation. The current concern is structural. A pyramid built over a modified water channel faces ongoing geological instability that becomes more pressing as the water table shifts and the stone above settles over centuries. Conservation work continues at Palenque with the awareness that the water flowing beneath the tomb that made it cosmologically perfect may also, over geological time, make it vulnerable. The story of the Palenque tomb is, in the end, a story about what human beings are capable of without help from anywhere else. That point matters more than it might initially seem, because the alternative theory, the ancient astronaut interpretation, is not simply wrong about the carving. It makes a larger claim, which is that the achievements of the ancient Maya are so extraordinary that they require an external explanation. The implication is that people living in the jungle without metal tools or wheeled transport could not have produced this level of sophistication on their own. They must have been taught. They must have had help. This implication is condescending in a way that becomes obvious the more you know about the Maya. They developed one of only 5 writing systems in history that emerged independently, invented from scratch, not adapted. Their astronomical observations calculated the solar year to a precision rivaling modern measurements. Their mathematics included a concept of zero, developed earlier than its introduction to Europe. Their architecture produced buildings still standing after more than 1,000 years. The 5-ton lid did not require alien technology. It required skill, time, and the resources of a powerful state, directed by a man who ruled for 68 years. The psychoduct required a sophisticated theology of death expressed in physical form. The underground channel required the creative decision to make the symbolic real. Nothing more than that, and nothing less. What the Palenque tomb reveals is not evidence of outside intervention. It is evidence of what a civilization looks like when it reaches full maturity. When its theology, its political structure, its artistic tradition, and its technical knowledge all operate at the same level of sophistication and reinforce each other. The tomb is a document in stone. The lid is a text. The psychoduct is a theological argument made physical. The underground river is a cosmology made literal. Every element of the tomb is an expression of a complete and coherent way of understanding the universe. And the man in the center of it all, the 12-year-old who inherited a threatened city, ruled it for 68 years, transformed it into a center of power and beauty, and then had his death framed as a cosmic event.
Language of the stars was extraordinary enough without needing to be anything other than what he was, a human being, and one of the most remarkable rulers in the history of the ancient world. No spacecraft, no aliens.